So, what happened to those patients who ended up in care homes? They were euthanized. Do we have evidence for such a brutal claim? Yes, we do. But we must warn you, for this is truly as ugly as it possibly gets. You might even realize for the first time what happened to your parents or grandparents and why they suddenly died. You see, all of a sudden, in April 2020, there was a great increase in deaths in care homes. No less than 26,541 people died in April 2020 alone, an increase of 17,850 on the 5-year average. That's an awful lot of excess deaths in just 1 month. What happened? They were given Midazolam. That's what happened. But you weren't told, were you? And neither were they. Midazolam is a very strong sedative, used among other things to relieve anxiety and fear. It is also used in lethal injections in the US, combined with 2 other drugs. The NHS workers were told to ease the suffering of the patients who were removed from their hospital beds and were now in their care home beds. Most of them had respiratory problems, so wouldn't it be nice to give them an intravenous cocktail of morphine and midazolam? Sounds sweet, doesn't it? Well, it wasn't. You see, midazolam affects the central nervous system, and thus a person's breathing. Midazolam is the last drug on earth these patients should have been given. It causes shallow, slowed or temporarily stopped breathing that may lead to permanent brain injury or death. Furthermore, midazolam is dangerous for elderly patients in general, also for those who don't even have breathing problems. If given at all, it should be done at a very low dosage. This is what would have been safe, according to a policy that was in place before the COVID-19 outbreak scam. A dosage for the elderly should not be greater than 0.5 milligram, max 1 milligram. However, during the outbreak, this policy was changed into the following: a starting dose of 2.5 milligrams and, if necessary, pump it up to 5 or even 10 milligrams. Who on earth changed these policies? The same people who had those thousands of patients removed from hospitals to care homes. The same who advised administering midazolam in the first place. The same who knew damn well what the effects would be. The very same who ordered insane amounts of midazolam at the beginning of 2020, so much so it had to be imported from France. That's right, a 2-year supply of a killer drug was imported from France. It was all used up by October of that same year. Not as part of the anesthesia during surgery, as was the official explanation. There were no surgeries during these COVID months. They were postponed by the same criminals, guilty of genocide of 26,500 people who died in April 2020 alone in care homes. Those people choked to death. Midazolam side effect, significant depression of respiration, killed them. They suffocated. What was written on their death certificates? Cause of death, COVID-19. who are the criminals behind this evil scheme? Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, Matt Hancock. GP and Member of Parliament, Dr. Luke Evans. And the Department of Health. Here they are, deliberating their Midazolam stockpile to make sure they were ready for the kill.
A good death needs three things. It needs equipment, it needs medication, and it needs the staff to administer it. So in terms of equipment, a few quick questions. Do you have enough syringe drivers in the NHS to deliver medications to keep people comfortable when they're passing away?
Yes, right now we do.
And the second one is with that's the syringe drivers deliver medication, particularly things like midazolam and morphine. Do you have any precautions put in place to make sure we have enough of those medications to be delivered?
Yes, we've got a big project to make sure that those sorts of medications, as well as the ITU medications that I spoke about earlier, that the supply chains, the global supply chains for those medicines are clear.
The so-called good death Hancock and Evans talked about means euthanasia. What you just witnessed was part of a parliamentary committee meeting in which euthanizing the elderly in care homes by means of midazolam and morphine was openly dealt with. Did they act on their own accord? Of course not. The Department of Health, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, each and every puppet of the cabal presently seated in the British government were part of this grand euthanasia scheme of the elderly, as part of the global sustainable development goals and thus the depopulation agenda. Shocking to see it in action, isn't it?